Rians, colleagues, thank you for being here today. Let me start with a question that will guide our discussion. What happens when a state that has long relied on overwhelming military power suddenly finds itself vulnerable, even exposed, by forces it has underestimated? This is not simply about a military base. This is about the deeper political and economic contradictions that shape the Middle East, Israel, and the future of global politics. News broke today that a hidden base belonging to Israel's elite Golani Brigade has been destroyed, not by a conventional strike, but by the effective detection and targeting of Arab missile systems. Now, let us pause and recognize what that means. The Golani Brigade is not an ordinary unit. It is one of the symbols of Israeli strength, a formation mythologized in the national narrative. To see its base hit, its secrecy compromised, and its defenses penetrated, this is more than just battlefield news. It is a message. And like all messages in history, it tells us something about power, resistance, and the shifting balance of forces. For decades, Israel has invested billions of dollars into military technology, Iron Dome systems, advanced fighter jets, cyber, intelligence capabilities, and of course, highly trained brigades like Golani. The assumption has always been clear that Israeli security rests on technological superiority and preemptive force. Yet what we are witnessing is the collapse of that assumption. Arab missile detection networks, developed, refined, and coordinated, have found a way to pierce the armor. That should make us stop and think, if a hidden base can be exposed, what else can? If the strongest unit can be struck, what does that say about the future of this conflict? But here's the deeper issue. The over-militarization of Israeli society has come at an enormous economic and political cost. Resources that might have gone into healthcare, housing, and education have instead been poured into endless cycles of weaponry and war. And yet, despite this colossal expense, the very security that was promised to the Israeli population is now cracking. The irony is striking. Billions spent, yet vulnerabilities remain. For the Arab side, the symbolic value is enormous. It demonstrates not only capability, but also resilience. After years of being portrayed as technologically inferior, the ability to track, detect, and strike one of Israel's most untouchable brigades undermines the carefully curated image of invincibility. And that, my friends, matters. Because politics is not only about bombs and bases, it is about perception. It is about morale. It is about the legitimacy of narratives. Now let us ask, where does this leave the region? The cycle of retaliation is predictable. Israel will respond with overwhelming force. Civilian areas will once again bear the brunt. And yet, each time Israel responds with force, it deepens the contradictions within its own society and fuels the resistance that surrounds it. You cannot bomb your way out of political failure. And the political failure here is refusing to address the root: a population denied sovereignty, dignity, and self-determination will not stop resisting. So here is the hook I want to leave you with. What if this destruction of a hidden base is not just another headline, but the early signal of a turning point? What if it tells us that the old order, of one side with power and the other with none, is beginning to fracture? History teaches us that empires, armies, and great powers all eventually face the same reality. Military might alone cannot hold down a people forever. Let me close by reminding us all, this is not about celebrating destruction. It is about understanding what it means. The lesson of today is that the military imbalance in the Middle East is not absolute. It is contested, it is shifting, and it carries consequences for everyone involved: Israelis, Palestinians, Arabs, and yes, the entire world community. We can either continue this endless spiral of strike and counterstrike, or we can confront the hard truth. Real security will only come when political solutions replace military illusions. Thank you. The news that a hidden base belonging to Israel's Golani Brigade has been destroyed is not just a military event. It is a political shockwave. To understand why, we need to recognize what the Golani Brigade represents. For decades, This unit has been seen as the very backbone of Israeli military power, a force trained for the toughest battles, with a history steeped in both national pride and myth. Its bases, locations, and operations have been guarded with the highest levels of secrecy. And yet, one of these hidden bases has now been detected, exposed, and struck. This raises a profound question. If even the most protected symbol of Israeli military strength can be reached, what does that say about the broader state of Israel's security? This event did not happen in isolation. It comes after years of Israel promoting its reputation as a nation shielded by technology, whether through the Iron Dome, its advanced fighter aircraft, or intelligence gathering capabilities. The destruction of this base challenges that narrative in a way that cannot easily be dismissed. The Golani Brigade has been considered almost untouchable, and the hidden nature of its infrastructure was supposed to ensure that. But once a force seen as elite is shown to be vulnerable, the psychological impact is immense, both inside Israel and across the Arab world. It forces ordinary Israelis to ask themselves, if even Golani is exposed, are any of us truly secure? And it fuels resistance movements with a new confidence. If Golani can be hit, so can others. Think for a moment about what secrecy means in military doctrine. A hidden base is not simply a place to rest soldiers or store equipment. It is a symbol of invisibility, of invulnerability. To reveal its position is to strip away a layer of power. And once exposed, destruction follows almost inevitably. The Arab missile detection systems that made this strike possible did more than locate a target. They cracked open a myth that had been carefully built and maintained for decades. The hook here is clear. Once the illusion of invulnerability is broken, it cannot be easily rebuilt. That is what makes this strike so politically significant. But beyond the symbolism, there are material consequences. The Golani Brigade is one of Israel's spearhead units for ground operations. To see its base destroyed means disruptions in command, logistics, and morale. It is not only about the physical losses, but about the message sent to soldiers themselves. For troops who believe they served in a unit beyond the reach of enemy fire, the reality of vulnerability is destabilizing. Military analysts know that morale is as critical as weaponry, and the strike threatens to erode the confidence of even Israel's most hardened fighters. From the Arab perspective, the victory is as much about perception as it is about tactical results. It demonstrates that years of developing detection technologies, coordinating intelligence, and refining missile accuracy are paying off. For populations long subjected to the overwhelming narrative of Israeli dominance, this event offers proof that imbalance can be challenged. It shifts the psychological terrain of the conflict, reminding the world that even the most powerful armies have cracks in their armor. The wider implications are already being debated. Some argue that this could mark the beginning of a new phase of asymmetrical warfare, where hidden assets, once assumed to be beyond the reach of detection, are no longer safe. Others suggest that the political fallout inside Israel could be just as damaging as the strike itself. How will Israeli leaders explain to their citizens that billions spent on defense still left one of the nation's elite brigades exposed? How will they justify the cost when the promise of absolute security has proven hollow? The answers to those questions will not be easy, because the truth is uncomfortable. Technological superiority cannot guarantee immunity from determined adversaries. And this is where the story hooks us most deeply. The destruction of a hidden Golani base is not just about military tactics or weaponry. It is about the unraveling of an assumption that has guided Israeli strategy for generations. If the unthinkable has happened once, it can happen again. That realization will echo not only in military circles, but in the halls of government, the minds of ordinary citizens, and the strategies of those who oppose Israel. This is more than news. It is a turning point. The successful targeting of Israel's hidden Golani Brigade base underscores something far larger than a single military operation. It highlights a breakthrough in Arab missile detection technology that has begun to challenge one of the longest standing assumptions of the region, that Israel's defenses are unbreachable. For decades, Israel has prided itself on its superior intelligence networks, its advanced radar systems, and its ability to strike first, leaving its adversaries constantly on the defensive. Yet, this event reveals that a technological shift is underway, one that could alter the balance of power in ways few imagined possible. The real question now is not whether this was an isolated success, but whether it represents the beginning of a new era in which Israel's vaunted invisibility is systematically unraveled. Detection has always been the invisible battlefield of modern warfare. The side that can see first, track first, and act first almost always dictates the terms of conflict. Israel has spent billions ensuring it is that side, building sophisticated layers of surveillance and missile defense systems designed to spot and intercept any threat. But what happens when the tables are turned? When Arab missile detection systems can peer through the very shroud of secrecy that has long protected Israeli bases? This is not merely about locating a target, it is about rewriting the rules of engagement. The hook here is clear. If detection technology has closed the gap, then Israel's most critical advantage may no longer hold. The Arab world's ability to detect, track, and target a hidden base points to years of investment and quiet innovation. These systems were not built overnight. They are the product of accumulated knowledge, technological partnerships, and strategic patience. For years, Israel has assumed its neighbors lack the capability to rival its cutting-edge detection networks. Yet, the destruction of the Golani base demonstrates that assumption no longer holds. To expose a site that was carefully concealed from satellites, drones, and aerial surveillance indicates not only technological parity, but, in some aspects, technological superiority. It signals that the traditional imbalance, Israel as the hunter and its adversaries as the hunted, is beginning to tilt. The psychological dimension of this cannot be overstated. In conflict, perception is as powerful as reality. If Israel's adversaries believe they can now find and strike what was once hidden, it emboldens resistance strategies and undermines Israeli deterrence. At the same time, if Israeli citizens believe their nation's most advanced security systems can be penetrated, their confidence in leadership and military doctrine begins to erode. That erosion of belief is often the prelude to shifts in political dynamics. History shows us that once a society feels its shield is cracking, pressure mounts for reassessment, sometimes even for change. From a purely military standpoint, detection breakthroughs alter the logic of warfare. Israel has relied heavily on hidden infrastructure, secretive troop deployments, and underground facilities to project invulnerability. With detection systems capable of exposing such assets, the strategic equation shifts dramatically. Suddenly, the cost of concealment rises, the risk of exposure grows, and the advantage of surprise diminishes. In practical terms, Israel may be forced to divert even greater resources to protect or relocate assets, stretching its already burdened defense budget further. The irony is striking. Technology, once seen as guaranteeing safety, now forces new vulnerabilities to the surface. For Arab states and resistance movements, the achievement provides not only a morale boost, but a roadmap. The strike shows that technology can level the playing field, that asymmetry can be countered not only with guerrilla tactics, but with advanced systems rivaling those of one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world. The hook here is powerful. If detection technology has pierced the shield once, what prevents it from happening again and again? Each successful strike reinforces the idea that Israel's dominance is no longer guaranteed. Internationally, the implications ripple outward. Allies who once viewed Israel as a fortress of military superiority may begin to question whether that status is as unshakable as it seemed. Regional actors who felt constrained by Israel's unmatched detection and defense capabilities may now feel emboldened to test boundaries. and global powers observing from afar will take note that the technological race in missile detection has opened a new chapter in Middle Eastern geopolitics, one that could make conflicts more unpredictable and more dangerous. Ultimately, the destruction of the Golani Brigade's hidden base through advanced detection is a warning shot, not just for Israel, but for the world. It is evidence that technological monopolies never last forever, that rivals adapt, and that even the strongest militaries cannot assume permanent superiority. The battlefield of detection, once dominated by one side, is now contested ground, and when the ability to see and strike is shared, the entire calculus of war changes. The most pressing question now is whether Israel will adapt quickly enough, or whether this event is only the first of many shocks to come. For decades, Israel has built its military doctrine around a single, central assumption that its security could be guaranteed through overwhelming technological superiority, rapid preemptive strikes, and the ability to stay one step ahead of its adversaries. The destruction of the Golani Brigade's hidden base reveals the cracks in this foundation. What was once thought of as an unshakable truth, that Israel's enemies could not penetrate its secrecy or defenses, has been exposed as vulnerable. This event is not merely a military setback, it is a revelation that the very assumptions underpinning Israel's security strategy are now in question. The hook here is impossible to ignore. When the foundations of security begin to falter, the entire structure of national confidence trembles with it. Israel has long prided itself on its capacity to deter threats before they materialize. This strategy has relied on intelligence dominance, cutting-edge missile defense systems, and elite units like the Golani Brigade to enforce control and project power. But deterrence only works as long as the perception of invulnerability remains intact. Once adversaries succeed in striking a target that was thought to be hidden and secure, the aura of superiority fades. This erosion is as much psychological as it is strategic. It tells both Israelis and their adversaries that the old playbook may no longer work, that the rules of the game are shifting, and that confidence in eternal security was misplaced. When we look closely, the reliance on technological superiority has always carried within it a contradiction. Israel poured billions into missile defense, cyber warfare, and intelligence gathering, expecting these systems to create an impenetrable shield. Yet the more heavily security depends on technology, the more vulnerable it becomes to breakthroughs by opponents. All it takes is one advance, one detection system, one strike, to show that even the strongest armor has gaps. This is precisely what the strike against the Golani Brigade base has demonstrated. The cost-benefit calculation shifts overnight. If adversaries can reach into Israel's hidden infrastructure, then the investment of billions in defense no longer translates to absolute safety. The illusion collapses. For Israeli society, this realization carries weight far beyond the battlefield. Citizens who have trusted their government's assurances of unmatched security are now confronted with images and reports of a destroyed elite base. This sparks uncomfortable questions. How could this happen? Where did the billions go? And most importantly, if the military cannot protect its most elite units, can it protect ordinary citizens? These questions do not simply float in the air. They shape politics, public trust, and ultimately the direction of national policy. Leaders who built their legitimacy on promises of security must now explain why the unthinkable became reality. On the other side, the Arab world sees something profoundly different. For decades, they have been told, by their adversaries and by the international community, that Israel's technological advantage was untouchable. The destruction of a hidden base breaks that narrative. It tells resistance movements that the imbalance is not absolute, that superiority is not permanent, and that persistence and innovation can yield results. The psychological power of this shift is immense. It does not matter whether the base's destruction changes the entire war effort overnight. What matters is the message: Israel can be reached, Israel can be hurt, and Israel can be exposed. The broader implication is that the erosion of Israel's security assumptions forces a recalibration on all sides. For Israel, it may mean doubling down on military spending, tightening secrecy, and launching harsher retaliations to restore the perception of dominance. Yet every escalation carries its own risks, financial burdens, political fractures, and international criticism. For Arab states and groups, the success encourages further investment in detection technologies and missile capabilities, reinforcing the belief that time and effort can balance the scales. The balance of fear, once tilted decisively toward Israel, begins to look more contested. What makes this moment particularly significant is that it challenges not just military strategies, but also political narratives. Israel's leaders have consistently promised that technological superiority would guarantee security, no matter the political environment. The destruction of the Golani Brigade base suggests otherwise. It points to a deeper truth. No amount of military hardware can substitute for political solutions. The hook here is sobering. When the weapons of yesterday can no longer protect against the strategies of today, nations must confront the limits of power itself. In the end, the destruction of a hidden base is more than a headline. It is a mirror reflecting the erosion of long-held assumptions, a warning that superiority does not mean invulnerability, and a reminder that even the most powerful states must adapt to shifting realities. Israel's model of security, founded on overwhelming force and technological dominance, is facing a test unlike any it has seen before. Whether it withstands that test or falters under its own contradictions will shape not only the future of Israel, but the entire geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. Israel's strategy of defense has long been built not only on military superiority, but also on an economic model that channels its extraordinary resources into the security sector. Billions of dollars are spent every year on weapons procurement, missile defense systems, intelligence operations, and the maintenance of elite brigades such as Golani. These expenditures are justified to the public under the promise that they guarantee safety, deterrence, and the survival of the state in a hostile region. Yet the destruction of a hidden Golani Brigade base reveals a contradiction that cannot be ignored. Despite staggering investments, vulnerability remains. The hook that arises is unavoidable. If so much is sacrificed domestically for the sake of security, why is security still so fragile? This contradiction exposes the limits of over-militarization. Israel has poured resources into its defense industry at the expense of social infrastructure. While hospitals strain under budget shortages, while housing remains prohibitively expensive for many families, and while inequality deepens, military spending continues to rise. Citizens are told that these sacrifices are necessary, that without them Israel would not survive. And yet the strike against Golani's hidden base undermines this argument. If the best trained soldiers, protected by the most advanced technology, can be struck, then the enormous social costs of militarization appear not only unsustainable but unjustified. People begin to ask, what is the point of sacrificing social well-being if the promised invulnerability is an illusion? This is where economics and politics intersect in dangerous ways. The Israeli leadership has long relied on the narrative that security comes first and all other needs must follow. It is the narrative used to justify austerity in social services and constant expansion in defense budgets. But when a base is destroyed despite those investments, the credibility of this narrative is shaken. Political legitimacy, built on the promise of unshakable security, begins to erode. That erosion is subtle at first, but history shows that once confidence in a government's ability to deliver safety is lost, political fractures widen. The hook here is striking. The stronger the promise of security, the deeper the disillusionment when that promise breaks. The destruction of the Golani base also highlights how overdependence on military power can blind a state to the importance of political solutions. Israel has consistently chosen to manage conflict through military means rather than address underlying grievances, such as Palestinian sovereignty or regional inequality. This strategy creates an endless cycle of escalation, where each attack prompts more investment in arms, which then leads to new forms of resistance, which then demand yet more arms. It is a cycle that drains resources endlessly while never delivering the final security it promises. The vulnerability revealed by the Arab missile detection system shows that no matter how much is spent, adversaries will always adapt. In that adaptation lies the exposure of militarization's limits. From a societal perspective, the contradictions are visible in everyday life. Young families struggle with unaffordable housing in Tel Aviv, while billions flow into new fighter jets. Teachers demand higher salaries, while funds are diverted to build and maintain secret military facilities. Patients wait for treatment in underfunded hospitals, while advanced weapon systems are showcased as symbols of national pride. These contrasts are not lost on the public, and when the very system that demands these sacrifices fails to deliver safety, resentment deepens. The destruction of a base becomes more than a military event, it becomes a catalyst for questioning the social contract itself. From the perspective of Israel's adversaries, the contradictions serve as a source of encouragement. They see a state that spends endlessly on arms, but still cannot prevent strikes on its most elite forces. They see a society stretched thin by economic pressures and ask themselves how long such a model can last. Every successful strike, therefore, is not only a military achievement, but also an economic and political victory. It widens the contradictions inside Israel, pushing the government to justify itself ever more aggressively, while simultaneously exposing its vulnerabilities. This is why the destruction of Golani's base resonates far beyond the battlefield. It points to a larger truth about the limits of militarization and the heavy costs of prioritizing defense over society. The hook is compelling. When a nation sacrifices everything for security, only to find that security crumbling, what happens next? This question will hang over Israeli politics in the days to come, forcing leaders, citizens, and even outside observers to reconsider whether endless military spending can ever deliver the peace and safety it promises. The strike on the Golani Brigade's hidden base is more than a battlefield incident. It is a symbolic moment that reverberates through narratives of power and resistance across the Middle East. For Israel, Golani has long stood as one of the crown jewels of its armed forces, a brigade celebrated in the national consciousness as an unyielding shield, forged in countless wars and remembered in patriotic songs and stories. To see that shield pierced by an adversary carries consequences far beyond the material damage of the attack itself. Symbolism in conflict often weighs as heavily as the destruction of tanks or bases, because it speaks to belief, morale, and the psychology of nations. The hook here is powerful. When a symbol falls, it shakes more than structures, it shakes identities. For Arab resistance movements, the destruction of this base marks a turning point in perception. For decades, they have faced an Israeli military apparatus marketed as indestructible, technologically superior, and endlessly capable of preemptive dominance. Every strike against Israel has often been followed by overwhelming retaliation, reinforcing the image of imbalance. Yet this event flips that script. By successfully exposing and striking a hidden Golani base, they have proven that Israel's most cherished military symbols are not beyond reach. That message carries immense psychological power, not only for fighters in the field, but for entire populations who have lived under the shadow of Israeli military supremacy. It says, invincibility is a myth, resistance is not futile. This symbolic victory resonates because symbols shape morale, and morale shapes conflict. Soldiers fight harder when they believe their cause is gaining strength, and communities endure hardship more readily when they see proof that endurance yields results. The destruction of Golani's base provides precisely that proof. It offers tangible evidence that patience, innovation, and persistence can dent even the most powerful adversary. For those long told that their resistance was hopeless, This becomes a rallying cry, a story retold in homes, classrooms, and speeches. The symbolic weight is not measured in explosions, but in the renewed spirit of struggle it inspires. On the Israeli side, the symbolic blow is equally profound. The Golani Brigade is not just another unit, it is woven into the fabric of national pride. Its bases and operations are symbols of security, secrecy, and resilience. To see one destroyed is to puncture that sense of security at its core. It leaves ordinary Israelis wondering if the stories they have long been told about the impenetrability of their defenses still hold true. The government can attempt to downplay the incident, to frame it as an aberration, but the symbolic damage lingers. Once the illusion of untouchability is broken, it cannot be restored with words alone. Internationally, symbolism matters just as much. Observers across the globe, whether allies, adversaries, or neutral parties, watch events like these to reassess the balance of power. The destruction of a Golani base through Arab missile detection technologies signals to the world that the military imbalance in the region is shifting. That perception influences diplomacy, affects alliances, and recalibrates strategies. Nations that once assumed Israel's dominance to be permanent may now consider alternative calculations. And for Arab states, the symbolic victory of penetrating Israel's elite defenses may encourage closer cooperation and deeper investment in military and technological capacities. It is important to recognize that symbolism can have cascading effects. A single strike, if strategically insignificant, might still carry the weight of transformation if it alters how people think about the conflict. In this case, the symbolic value lies not only in the blow to Israel's prestige, but also in the empowerment of its adversaries. If Golani can be reached, then no unit, no base, and no facility can claim absolute safety. That realization shifts the psychology of deterrence. It weakens Israel's ability to intimidate, and it strengthens the resolve of those who seek to resist. The hook is sharp. When deterrence crumbles, resistance grows teeth. What emerges from this moment is the recognition that wars are not fought solely with weapons, but also with narratives. The destruction of the Golani base becomes part of a larger story told across the region, a story of resistance breaking through layers of dominance. And as that story spreads, it changes calculations, emboldens movements, and unsettles those who once believed themselves untouchable. This is the deeper significance of symbolism in war. It reshapes not just strategy, but the very way people imagine victory and defeat. When we turn to the sixth key point, we arrive at one of the most pressing questions of our time. What does this conflict mean for the global order and for the way nations interact in a world already riddled with instability? The destruction of a Golani Brigade base, achieved through Arab missile detection and precision targeting, is not just a localized military incident. It is a symbol, a signal, a warning. It raises questions about deterrence, about the fragility of alliances, and about the future of warfare itself. The truth, often obscured by layers of official statements and media spin, is that events like this redefine the boundaries of power. And if we do not pay attention, we risk missing how the balance is shifting under our very feet. The first ripple effect is on the credibility of Israel itself, both regionally and globally. For decades, Israel has presented itself not only as a formidable military force, but as a beacon of technological superiority. Its defense systems, the Iron Dome, the Arrow David sling, are often cited as examples of the most sophisticated military engineering on the planet. Yet here we are, confronted with a situation in which Arab detection and targeting capabilities exposed vulnerabilities that were previously thought unthinkable. What does it mean when a state that prides itself on invincibility can be penetrated in such a way? For its neighbors, it signals that Israel is not immune to the forces around it. For the global audience, it underlines a broader truth. Technological superiority is not eternal, and military dominance is always temporary. That is a sobering realization. The second ripple effect spreads to the United States and its role as Israel's steadfast ally. Washington has built much of its Middle Eastern strategy on the assumption that Israel could hold its own, serving as both a regional power and a forward line of defense for American interests. But if Israel's defensive infrastructure can be compromised, then the entire foundation of U.S. policy in the region looks less stable. This creates a dilemma. Does the U.S. double down, increasing aid and military backing to cover the perceived vulnerabilities, or does it reassess, recognizing that backing Israel at all costs may be producing diminishing returns in a world where rival powers, Russia, China, even Iran, are eager to step into any cracks in the facade? Either path comes with consequences, not just for the Middle East, but for the credibility of American leadership globally. The third ripple effect is economic. We cannot separate geopolitics from global markets. Oil prices, arms sales, energy security, all of these are tied to Middle Eastern stability. When a base of such symbolic importance is destroyed, markets react not to the physical loss itself, but to what it signals about future instability. Investors begin to anticipate escalations, governments brace for new sanctions or supply disruptions, and ordinary citizens, whether in Tel Aviv, Cairo, New York, or Berlin, find their lives affected in ways they often cannot connect directly to events like these. Yet the connection is there, undeniable and immediate. Wars are no longer contained within borders, they ripple outward into every corner of the global economy. The fourth ripple effect involves the psychological dimension of international politics. Narratives are as powerful as missiles. For years, Israel has wielded the narrative of strength, resilience, and technological dominance. Now, its adversaries will seize upon this incident to craft their own story that Israel is vulnerable, that resistance pays, that the myth of invincibility is shattered. Once such a narrative takes hold, it spreads rapidly across the region, inspiring movements, fueling propaganda, and shaping the strategic calculations of actors from state militaries to non-state groups. The danger lies not just in what happened, but in what people believe it means. And belief, as history has shown, often drives events more forcefully than material realities. The fifth ripple effect touches directly on global military doctrine. The fact that detection and precision targeting could achieve such a devastating result underscores a fundamental transformation in warfare. The age of massive armies and overwhelming force is giving way to a new era where intelligence, detection, and precision strike capabilities can level the playing field. Smaller powers, even non-state actors, can now challenge larger militaries not by outmatching them in strength, but by outmaneuvering them in strategy and technology. This democratization of military capability is reshaping conflict everywhere from Ukraine to Yemen to Gaza. It is no longer about who has the biggest arsenal, it is about who can best exploit weaknesses in real time. Finally, the sixth ripple effect forces us to confront the human dimension, often overshadowed by the spectacle of geopolitics. Behind every destroyed base, every fallen soldier, every displaced civilian, there lies a story of lives altered forever. And when those lives are altered, societies change, politics hardens, and generations grow up under the shadow of conflict. The destruction of the Golani Brigade base is not just a headline, it is part of a cycle that breeds fear, resentment, and retaliation. If this cycle continues unchecked, then the geopolitical consequences will pale in comparison to the social and human costs that stretch decades into the future. The hooks here are sharp and undeniable: a rising vulnerability in Israel's defenses, a recalibration of U.S. foreign policy, a shaking of global markets, a rewriting of narratives, a revolution in military doctrine, and a deepening of human suffering. Together, they illustrate not just the local impact of one incident, but the cascading consequences that affect us all, no matter how far from the battlefield we live. This is why we must pay attention, not because of sensational headlines, but because the structure of the global order itself is being reshaped before our eyes.